In today's video, I'm sharing 15 unique Valentine's Day DIYs. Welcome to CreArtive by Nature DIY and Decor. My name is Donna. So for this first DIY, I'm using an assortment of supplies from Dollar Tree. I found these little wood hearts in the wedding section, and they've got little magnets on the back and they say save the date on the front. I just used a sanding block to remove the lettering, and then I just picked off the magnet on the back side. I wiped off all the excess dust and they're all nice and clean. Next, I found this wired jute from Dollar Tree, and I am just going to bend this into shape to form a heart. Now I did twist the bottom edge, as you can see there, and it was unraveling a little bit. So I did end up needing to use just a little bit of hot glue on the end, and that helps to prevent it from unraveling. I create a total of 3 of these wired hearts, and I have a total of 3 of the little wood hearts. And now I am going to be decorating 3 of these chalkboard hearts, again from Dollar Tree. I just made a simple little jute twine bow, and I glued that to cover up the hole. So once I have my selection of hearts all ready to go, I created some little hanging loops out of the jute twine, and I end up gluing them on the back of the chalkboard hearts as well as the wood hearts. So next step, I am going to be making 2 tassels out of the jute twine. I just like to wrap the twine around my fingers several times, and then I just cut off another length and pull that through my loops, and then I tie it off with a knot. So just to let you know, this is a compilation video. I will have all the original videos along with video chapters listed down in the description box below for easy viewing. Next, I take another piece of jute twine and I just wrap that around the cluster of string at the top, as you can see here, and that will help create that tassel look. And then I cut through all my loops. There's lots of tutorials on how to make tassels. This is the way I like to do it. So I strung all the hearts across a piece of jute twine to form a garland, and then you can hang that up anywhere you'd like within your home. I think it is such a pretty and unique item. Okay, so for our next project, you're going to need a bag of treats, anything you'd like. I found these yummy treats from Dollar Tree, and you're going to want to place them in a jar. Next, you're going to be covering a foam cone with some felt fabric or any other fabric of your choice. So I like to just put some glue on the cone and then roll that cone onto the fabric. And then that way here you know that you'll get good coverage. Continue to use your hot glue to attach the fabric onto your cone. You'll want to trim off any of the excess as needed. So once your cone is all covered, you are going to want to trim off the bottom edge, but you want to leave enough fabric so it can go over top of the jar, as you can see there. Now I am going to be creating the beard. This is some chunky yarn that I actually had found at Michael's, and as you can see, it had a thread around it. I removed the thread and created 2 different lengths, as you can see here, And I just tie it off with one of those strings in the middle. And then I separate all those fibers and it created this really beautiful beard texture. I love this. I don't know if Michael still has this or not, so you'll have to check it out. But now I'm going to be attaching that beard that I made to the opposite side of the seam that I have there on the felt and foam cone. Again, I'm just going to be using my hot glue gun. Here I am just making sure that it all fits on top of my jar, and it does. So next I am just trimming off the beard end, and then I am going to generously apply some hot glue to the top of our jar lid, and then I'll attach our foam cone. I'm just making sure that nothing is attaching to the glass portion of our jar because I want to be able to open this up. So now we're all ready to start to embellish our gnome. I'm going to be using a wood bead. You can use any size that you like. I am going to be staining this with an ink pad. As you can see, there is a hole through this bead, so I am going to have to camouflage that. So I just tuck that hole up underneath the hat, and then I like to add a little bit of glue at the bottom there, and then I just kind of push the bead in amongst the beard and you can't even see that hole. So now I've decided that I want to add just a cute little embellishment. So I'm going to cut a heart shape out of some pink felt. And then I thought for another cute little touch, I would use these coconut buttons that I found at Dollar Tree. I am going to be gluing that onto the center. And then I am going to attach this all to the hat. So I decided to go in and just make sure that that hat rim stays down. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue to our lid rim, and then I'm pressing the edge of the hat down into place. And then that way here, I know that it will stay together. You can see how easy it is to remove this. This would make such a fun gift for anybody who's special in your life. So I actually have another gnome for you, and this one will complement our little treat jar gnome really nicely. I am using a large cone, styrofoam cone, and I'm covering the entire piece just with some basic cotton fabric. You can of course use anything you would like that you've got in your stash. So I'm using hot glue to attach it again. I'm just trimming off excess fabric on the bottom, and then I am folding it in to cover that base, as you can see here. So I wanted to cover up all that excess fabric on the bottom, so I'm using a piece of felt that's the same color as my fabric, and I glued it down and then I cut in around it. As you can see, I was just trimming off some of the excess fabric at the tip. You don't have to worry about how it looks at this point because that will be covered up. But now I am just making sure that the bottom is all glued on into place before I trim off the excess felt. Okay, so now I am going to create the hat. As you can see here, I'm using a gray piece of felt and I'm just folding over the one end, and then I'm cutting it off and creating a cone shape like you see here. That will fit over this cone really nicely. You can adjust this for any size cone that you decide to use. I just glued down the one edge and then I have a really nice cone shape that fits over top. I like to match up the seam of my hat with the seam on the cone, and then you know that all those little mechanics will be at the back side. I'm going to use this chunky yarn again. It's kind of like a roving, and I just do the same technique as I did before. So for this gnome, I decided to create some arms. Now you can roll your fabric. Here I am just going to be folding it. It will give you the same kind of look, but I just fold it over. There's no precise size to this. I just kind of guesstimate what I want to use. And then I also decided to create some little mittens. As you can see here, I doubled up my fabric and just kind of created a mitten shape. And then I glued those pieces together and glued them into place on the arms. Once you have your mittens in place, you can then glue the rest of the arm together. So now that I got my arms, I decided to start to glue all my pieces together. I first attached the beard, and now I'm just trying to figure out my placement for the arms. As you can see, I trimmed off the excess, and then I just glue them up underneath the hat. But I always like to figure out my placement first to make sure that it looks right. I have lots of different gnome tutorials for you, and I will have a playlist down in my description box for you to check out if you want to see how to make more gnomes. So once you have your placement figured out, then you can glue your arms into place. I'm just using a wood bead again, and I'm just staining it with that pink ink, and I'm attaching the nose the same way as I did before. So now I am going to continue to attach the hat to the body of our gnome, and just making sure that everything is fitting right and attached properly, just so it doesn't fall apart. I'm going in with my scissors and I'm just trimming the beard up just a little bit. Here again, I'm using a felt heart to embellish the hat, and I decided to also use one of those coconut heart buttons again. I just think they're so cute and is a really nice natural touch. So I thought this would be something really fun to add. I had these little booklets. They're like a sticker, and I had picked them up quite a few years ago, and they were in my stash, and I thought it would just be fun to add this to make it look like it was a little love note. As I said, they are a sticker, so I had to remove the foam backing. It was sticky, and I wanted to cover the mess up, so I just took a piece of cardstock and I covered that all up. And then I decided that I would make it look like he's holding the little book. So I just used some hot glue and I bent up the arms, as you can see, so the hands are glued to the book. I wanted it to kind of be lifted a little bit more towards his face, so I glued at the joints of the arm to make him look like elbows. You could have used wire within the arms so you could bend them, but I was just doing this on a whim, and this is what I came up with. I have to say, these are two of one of my most favorite gnomes. They were so easy to make, and I just love how unique they are. Okay, so for our next DIY, you are going to be needing some watercolor paper, and you can use watercolors in any style that you choose. I am using some shimmer watercolors that I picked up from Michaels. It's the Artist Loft brand, and I'm just giving a wash over top using the neutral colors that are in the palette. Again, you can use any color you like. Pinks and purples or the reds would be beautiful as well for this project. but I'm going with the neutrals for a specific reason, and you'll see here in a minute. Once you have the desired coverage, you're going to want to set it aside and allow it to dry. So I'm going to be using these wood hearts again from Dollar Tree, and I needed to sand off the lettering. Once that's all sanded off, you don't have to worry about this being perfect as we're going to be covering this up, but I wanted to get most of it off. So once that's done, you want to remove the dust. I also removed the magnet off the back, and then I am going to give this a coat of some foil adhesive. I like to use specifically foil adhesive when I'm adding gold leaf to my projects. I have seen some people use Mod Podge. I honestly don't know how that works. So if any of you have used that, please leave me a comment down below and let me know how that works. Once you've got your adhesive on, you allow it to dry till it's tacky, and then it's time to add your gold foil. So this particular gold foil is from Dollarama here in Canada, but you can get foil from Dollar Tree and from craft stores like Michael's. So you want to add the foil onto the tacky adhesive and then rub off the excess with a soft cloth. It's called burnishing, and as you can see, it gives a really cool effect. I'm just distressing the edges of this heart just a little bit by using my sanding block. This is optional. I dust it all off and then set it aside. So I like to keep a stash of pre-made cards. I pick these up from either a local dollar store. I've even got them from Dollar Tree. I'm using the cream colored, and I'm tearing this watercolor that I did. As you can see, it's really a nice finish on there. And I just tore the edges, and I'm distressing the edges with some gray ink. I'm trying to keep my colors all nice and neutral. I tore it down into the size that will fit onto the face of my card. And then I'm just adding some glue tape to the back and pushing that onto the front using my bone folder. Next, I'm distressing the edges of my heart using that same gray ink. And then using my hot glue, I attached the heart to the front of this card. And that's it. It was so simple and is such a unique card to give. So for this next project, I spray painted this love sign in an antique white, and now I am painting the edges with an antique white. My spray paint didn't quite reach those edges very well, so I decided to go in and just paint them out with some craft paint. Then you'll want to allow it to dry well. I picked up that love sign from Dollar Tree. So next, I have got this beautiful piece of birch bark. It is nice and flat. I'm going to attach it to this canvas that I had in my stash. I am generously applying both some tacky glue as well as some hot glue. Use any adhesive that you love to use. I'll press the birch bark and the the canvas together. I ended up generously applying the hot glue. As you can see, it was lifting in a few places, but you don't have to worry about that because I am going to be doing another step to help hold this all together. Next, I am going in and adding some weight to the top to allow the tacky glue to dry well. Once dry, you can go in again and use your hot glue in places where you feel like you need some more adhesion, but mine felt pretty good. So now I'm using some jute twine and I glue a strand to the back side, and then I'm wrapping the jute twine around the canvas as well as the bark randomly just to give a really organic look. And then I end up just gluing it onto the opposite end, as you can see here. another thing I did was remove that little hanger that they had on the back as well. So my canvas and my love sign are all ready to go. I'm just adding one last little touch. I wanted to just bring this all together, so I distressed the edges of the love sign with some gray ink, and that'll help tie it in with the birch bark. Next, I am going to also be removing those little hanging hooks that are on the back side of the love sign as well. And then I'm using my tacky glue as well as my hot glue to attach this to the canvas. So you want to press it down firmly, and then I added some weight to it again and allowed it to dry. And if you need to, again, add some extra glue like I did here, feel free. It's really easy just to get up underneath, and then that's it. I still have this sign in our master bedroom. It's about 2 years old, and I absolutely love this. So I'm going to be using this plastic container that had some ornaments in it, this sock left over from a project, rocks from outside, and some twine that I pulled off an old project. I'm going to start by putting some rocks in this plastic container just to provide some weight so it doesn't topple over. And I'm going to slip the container inside this sock. You can use some rice or some gravel or whatever to fill up the container, but I chose to use the rocks as I'm trying to keep this a trash to treasure. So I'm just going to tie off the top using the twine, and then I'm going to be trimming around the top to remove the excess. Then glue the rest to the edge of the jar. I want to welcome you all to CreArtive by Nature DIY and Decor. My name is Donna. If you're new, I'd love for you to tap on the subscribe button along with the bell to keep up to date with everything I have to share. So I had this piece of cardstock in my stash. It's just some leftover packaging, and I am going to cut off a piece to form a rectangle, and now I'm going to roll it to form it into a cone. Once I have a cone shape that'll fit over the top of my jar, I am going to be stapling and adding some glue. That'll help hold the cone's shape. So you're going to want to trim off any of the excess cardboard and even out the bottom, and then just double check to make sure that it's going to fit over the jar. And then you can add some more staples just to help secure the cone shape. So this fabric here is part of a leg from some old pajama bottoms, and I am just going to trim it off, removing all the seams, and this is what I will be using to cover up the cone. So I'm just measuring here to make sure that I do have enough fabric to cover the cone. And then using some hot glue, I am going to run a bead along the cone and then press that into the fabric. I am going to continue along until I have my cone covered. Trim off any excess fabric. So I'm just going to trim off the bottom, and I'm going to make sure that there is approximately an inch overhang on the bottom of the cone. And then I'm going to be folding in that portion, and I'm using some hot glue and attaching it to the inside of the cone. So now I am using some textured yarn that I had picked up from the thrift store. And I'm going to be creating a beard by forming some large loops around my fingers. Now you could use some faux fur if that's what you have in your stash. I just wanted to again keep in theme of creating my gnome as a trash to treasure. So I am using some upcycled items and just some trash or recyclables and just things from my stash. So once you've got the loops formed, you're going to just tie it off with an extra piece of string, and then you're going to cut through the loops and trim as needed. So here I'm just measuring to make sure that I have the right beard for this gnome and that my hat will fit over top. And then I am going to glue the beard into place as shown. Continue to trim your beard as you need to form the shape that you like. So now I'm going to be cutting the other piece of fabric in half, and again I'm just going to be removing that bottom hemline, and then I'm going to roll this up as I want to give this little gnome some arms. So I'm just going to roll it and then run a bead of hot glue just to seal that all up, and I will be making 2 arms, of course. Here I'm just making sure they are the same thickness, and then you can also cut them down so that they are the same length as well. So once you have your arms formed, I like to cut the top off on an angle and then glue it onto the top. I just find that then it's not too bulky underneath the hat. So here I'm applying some glue and then adding the arm to the rim, and I do the same for the other side. Once the glue sets, you can then take your hat and measure to make sure that enough of the bulk is removed. And then you can actually glue your hat into place at this point if you desire. So I had all these little pieces that I picked up from the thrift store, just in some little grab bags. Here I have a pom-pom, and then I've got some pretty little wood beads that are pink, and they do have a hole. So I am just inserting the wood beads into the sleeves, and I'm going to hide those holes by pulling the sleeve over the edge. And these will be the hands for the gnome. So I'm going to paint the front of this little hug wood sign. Again, this is from the thrift store, and I'm just doing the front. I don't want to do the whole wood piece, just so that it ties the nose in. The natural wood color will complement the nose nicely, but this is completely by choice. Feel free to decorate your gnome any way you'd like. So once the paint is dry, you can then glue the hands onto either side of your embellishment. And I am just going to be using some hot glue for this. So I'm just going to now use this scrap felt, and I'm going to be cutting out a heart shape, and using some hot glue, I am going to attach this cute little heart to the hat. I think this little gnome turned out so cute, and I was so happy that I was able to create it out of some trash and some thrifted finds. Everything here was definitely a trash to treasure. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. So for these next few projects, I'm diving into my stash of scrapbook paper. I'm just measuring these candles that I got from Dollar Tree. They are in the candle section regularly. And then I cut down my scrapbook paper to size. I'll be using this orange tape adhesive to attach the paper to the glass. It's a stronger tape. You could use any adhesive that you like to use. So I just run a strip on one edge of the paper and then I attach that to the glass. And then you're gonna want to roll the glass onto that paper, and then you can add another strip of your adhesive on the opposite side of the paper and continue to roll it and attach it to the jar. So I decided to create 2 of these jars like this, and I'm adding just a little touch of jute twine around the top. You could use lace or ribbon, or you can just leave them plain, but I really like the rustic look of the jute twine. So next I'm going to be decorating these LED pillar candles. Again, you can pick these up at Dollar Tree. I'm gonna just decorate these the same way using our scrapbook paper. These are some really quick and easy projects that you can create for Valentine's Day, for weddings, really for any time of the year. You can just decorate these up any way you'd like. But I thought they would be something fun and easy to do for the Valentine's Day season. Again, I dug out my jute twine. Again, you could also use some lace or pretty ribbon, and I just wrapped that around the middle and tied a simple knot. I have these really cute little heart wood embellishments, so I added that into the middle as well, and that is it. It's just such a simple project, and you can decorate them any way you'd like. So I found these really cute basic candles in a glass jar. I don't know if Dollar Tree still has them or not, but I know they carry stuff similar. I am going to be covering these with gold foil. So again, I am using my gold foil adhesive and I'm randomly applying the adhesive all over the jar. Again, you could probably use Mod Podge, but I don't know if that works or not, so you'll have to let me know. I am going to use both silver and gold foil. The tip is though to remember to allow the adhesive to dry till it's tacky before you add your foil. So again, you're going to use your soft cloth and burnish the surface of our little glass candle holder. And I have gaps on there, and that's actually what I wanted. It creates a bit more of a rustic kind of look. And here is all our pieces put together. I think it just looks so beautiful and romantic, and these were all very easy to make. So if you've been following me for a while, you know how much I love to use nature in my projects. I had gone foraging and found this really cool branch and I trimmed it down to size. I'm going to be creating a wall hanging. I found all these really cool embellishments from Dollar Tree and I laid them out on my surface in varying heights. And then I am going to be using some different lengths of jute twine to create my hangers for my wall hanging. And as you can see, I just tied a simple knot onto my embellishments. You could use any type of string or any type of trim that you would like. So I thought for a really pretty added touch, I would add some wood beads to some of these embellishments, and I'm using 2 different sizes. You can use any size that you would like. Just use whatever you have on hand. So I'm just going to set that Valentine word aside. I picked that up from Dollar Tree. And now I'm going to start to attach all our strings onto our branch, and I just tie them on and then trim off any of this excess. So this part is totally optional. I thought, of course, since I am going with the Valentine's Day theme, I am gluing this Valentine's galvanized word onto the top of my branch. I'm just using some hot glue, but again, use any adhesive that you would like. Next, I'm again using some jute twine, and I'm using that to create my hanger for my wall, and I'm just tying it onto each end of my branch. I just tied it on in a way so it would hang balanced, as you can see here. I think it's so unique and very rustic. I really think it's so cool hanging on our wall. For our first DIY, you're going to need 3 of these frames with the corrugated galvanized metal along with the clip. We are going to be removing the back frame holder and all the little pieces at the back side there. I'm just using some wire snips to pull it off. Next, just use a little screwdriver and remove the clip. So I'm going to cover up the hole that's left behind with a touch of hot glue, and then I'm going to paint it over with some silver paint. It'll look like it's a little bit of a nail head. You could use a bow if you would like. That's completely up to you. So as you can see, I have filled in the holes and allowed them to dry. I have these grapevine heart wreaths from Dollar Tree, along with some branches that I cut up. I am going to glue the heart to the middle frame, and then I am going to be gluing the twigs into place on top of the metal as well. And we are going to be spelling out I heart you. If you're new to my channel, I want to say welcome. I'd love for you to become a part of my community by tapping on the subscribe button along with the bell to keep up to date with all I have to share. So I removed the metal panel along with the backing, and I am going to glue all the frames together. So I'm just adding a bead of hot glue and pressing them together while they are on a flat surface. And then I'm going to take some craft sticks and secure the joints just again with some hot glue. So once you have all the backing and the metal pieces back in place, I am now going to take a cluster of some branches, and as you can see, these branches match in color to the lettering, but you can use whatever you want. You don't even have to use branches if you choose not to. You could just create a hanger using some string, but I really like to use some natural elements to my projects whenever I can. So now I am just taking some twine and I'm going to wrap it around each end of the branch cluster. And then you can tie it off with a knot. So now I'm just kind of measuring to see where I want to place the branches, and I flip my frames upside down, and then I'm going to take some jute twine and I'm just roughly measuring the length of twine that I need to create the hanger. Once you have the desired length, you can then take another piece and cut the exact same length. And here I'm just going to measure again where I'm going to place the twine, and then I'm going to glue the twine into place on the back side of the frame panels. Once the glue has set, you can flip it back over and then slip those strings over your branches, and there you've created a hanger. I have decided that I am just going to tie some jute string to the middle and create a loop for me to hang it on my wall. But if you want, you could just try and slip your hook into the branches and just have it all naturally hung on the branches. I love the unique look of this piece. I think it would be great to hang up year-round, especially in a bedroom. This is great for Valentine's Day. For our next Valentine's DIY, I am going to be using this frame that I had in my stash that I had picked up from Dollar Tree a while ago. I am going to be using the back side of this frame. I am going to just glue a piece of twine to create a hanger on the front panel portion. And then I am going to cover the piece with some gel stain, and this color is walnut. I'm just using a paintbrush to apply it, and then I use a rag to remove the excess. I found these wood hearts in the wedding section at Dollar Tree, and as you can see, there is a little magnet. I am just going to remove that. I end up using a flat palette knife just to pop that off. And then I'm going to take a coarse sanding block and I'm going to sand off all that lettering. Just be careful that you don't sand right through the wood veneer. So I want to distress the frame now, so I'm using again the coarse sanding block, and I'm just sanding off some of that walnut stain. I really like this look. I think it just makes it very rustic in feel. Now I'm using a tumbling block again from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to hot glue it to the back of this wood heart. And then I'm going to apply some more wood glue, making sure that I've got the string in the right position, and I'm going to glue the heart to the middle of the frame. This is a very simple and easy DIY for Valentine's, very neutral in tone, and I love the rustic feel of it. And for our next DIY, I'm using this tray from Dollar Tree, and again I'm going to give it a coat of some walnut stain. I really like this stain. It is from the Deco Art Collection Americana. Again, I'm using a paintbrush and a rag to apply the stain. You could use some chalk paint as an alternative, that's completely up to you, but I just really wanted a rustic feel to my pieces for today. Once the tray is dry, I am now going to be using some battery-operated fairy lights along with some preserved reindeer moss. As you can see, this moss comes in nice little pieces. I am going to glue the battery pack to the back side of this tray. Just make sure that the battery pack is accessible at the back side so you can replace the batteries. I'm just going to use hot glue to attach it, and you could use Velcro if you desire. Now I'm going to feed the lights through one of the handles on the tray, and I'm just going to wrap the blank wire around the edge, and then using some hot glue, I will attach the rest of the cording to the back side of the tray so you don't see it. Now, my glue gun is a low temp, so I am able to apply the glue, allow it to cool for a few seconds, and then I can use my finger to press it down. Feel free to use finger protectors that you can get from Dollar Tree. So now I flip the box over and turn the lights on, and same thing, I'm going to use some hot glue and I am going to attach the lights to the back side of this tray. Again, I'm just using some hot glue and pushing it down after a few seconds. The nice thing about using these wired fairy lights is that you can move the lights around. Now I'm going to use the reindeer moss and I'm going to use some hot glue and I'm going to press it down into the back side of the tray. Yes, you will be covering up the lights, but it really gives a pretty whimsical glow to the piece. As an alternative, you could use some Spanish moss if you'd like, but I really like the look of the reindeer moss. Here you can see how pretty it looks glowing and how it looks when the lights aren't on. I just love this look. Now I'm going to be using this galvanized word love that I picked up from Dollar Tree, and I'm just applying a generous amount of hot glue, and then you want to push it into the moss. That way here you will have a really good adhesion between the letters and the moss. This Valentine's DIY is so fun and whimsical. I would leave this up year round. I truly, truly love this piece. As always, let me know down in the comments section which one of these DIYs is your favorite. So I am creating some really cute and unique gnomes for you all again. I found these little cotton sacks from Dollar Tree and I'm filling up the bottom with some pebbles and then filling them the rest of the way up with some fiberfill. I thought this would be a cool and unique way to create a gnome instead of using a sock. And now for the hat, again, I am just going to be using some felt. I find felt is one of the easier things to use when creating gnomes, but you can use any fabric that you'd like. Again, I'm just creating a simple cone shape out of the felt, and I just trim it down to make sure that it fits over the top of the little sack that I made for the body. So I'm using this chunky yarn. I found this at a store called Dollarama here in Canada. I just cut a chunk and then I am going to just tie it off at one end and then fluff it up, and that creates a really cool beard shape, as you can see here. You can use some yarn of any kind to create a beard, as well as some faux fur. Again, you can check out my tutorials to see all the different ways that I make gnomes. So now I'm just going to attach the beard and attach the gnome hat using my hot glue. And then this time around, I'm using a pom-pom for the nose, and as you can see, it's in a pink color. I'm also going to be creating a girl gnome. So everything is the same steps, except instead of a beard, I'm adding a couple of pigtails. And as you can see, I just clumped my yarn together and tied it off in 2 sections, and that creates a really cute little pigtail. So just for a little decorative touch, I'm going to add some ribbon around the middle of the sack, and that will just create a pretty little sash for our girl gnome. And then you can start to glue all your other pieces into place. So this next step is optional. I like to sometimes bend over the tip of the gnome. I think it just kind of creates a little bit more of a casual look. This again is just totally optional. And then you can go in and start to embellish. I got this really cool little love sign. It's like laser cut wood, and I colored it using my ink pad in pink. And I do the same for this little wood heart, and then I just glue these pieces into place. Isn't this just the cutest little couple you've seen? They were so easy to put together and definitely something that was really unique using the sack. I think they're just so cute sitting on the shelf. So as always, I would absolutely love to know which project was your favorite, and if you plan on making any of these. I really enjoyed creating these, and I love all the different unique items that were made. I want to thank you all so much for being here today. Here's some more inspiration for you all, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.